Welcome to the Local Small Business Coach Podcast, where we discuss everyday challenges local small business owners face and help to provide the information you need to increase your profits, boost your sales, improve your processes, and develop stronger teams. So if you're looking to take your local small business to the next level, let's dive in. Here's your coach, Tammy Adams.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 120 of the Local Small Business Coach Podcast. Today we're going to discuss the pros and cons of working with family. Hey, badass business owners. Welcome to another episode of the Local Small Business Coach Podcast, where each week my goal is to help you get one step closer to that $100,000 in take-home pay. How many of you work with family? And how many of you are thinking about working with family? So I thought today we would talk about working with family. Actually, I've wanted to kind of talk about this for a while. Back when I started my Baskin Robbins and I was going to do my ice cream shop, part of the reason that I retired from Home Depot and bought this local small business, part of it was selfish because I wanted to, have my own business and my own local small business, if you will. But I also wanted to create a family business. I had a lot of nephews and nieces, and I had folks in my life that lived with me, near me, and whatnot. And I figured, hey, you know what? They can work with me. What a great way to give my nephews and nieces the opportunity to have their first job on their resume to say that they worked at this ice cream store, because they would help out on the weekends or they'd stay for the week or whatever the case may be. And one of the things that I learned is there definitely are some pros and cons to doing this. And one of the cons that I personally discovered, we're going to go into more detail here from this great article that I just read. But for me personally, one of the biggest cons is when people lost their enthusiasm for it. Unfortunately, I was still left holding the bag. I still had this business that I had to run. Unfortunately, I ended up having to run it without the assistance and help that I originally thought I was going to get. So that part was not fun. I'll be honest with you. I kind of got very disappointed that here I left this high-paying job to create this business, and everybody kind of petered out on it and didn't have that same passion. So one of the things that I would definitely recommend is if you're going to do a business with your family, make sure they have as much invested and as much passion for it as you do, because you have to be prepared before you go into that business that you're willing to take it on 100% by yourself if they choose to go into a different direction. So that is definitely one of the cons of it. The pro that I got out of it was, like I said, I was able to help not only my nephews and nieces, but several family and friends whose kids would come work with me for a little while and, kind of apprentice, and they would help out on special events, and we would teach them how to scoop and how to interact with customers and the importance of giving great customer service. And some of them were really shy. So it really was a tough thing for them to come out of that. But I remember back when I first started, how difficult that was for me, being an introvert, to get out there and talk to customers. I mean, today I don't have an issue with that, but back then it was very difficult. So I really wanted to try to help them. And I found that to be a huge pro. Just the business skills that you can start planting early, and even, the customer service skills and stuff like that. Matter of fact, I credit a lot of my early childhood years of going to work with my mom on Sundays. She worked at a bread store, and I got to go with her, and I got to not so much do the cash register and everything else, but I helped stock the shelves, and I got to watch her with the customers and things like that. So, I mean, it really left an impression that really made me realize that I was going to be a business person someday, that I was going to be a really good worker, hard worker. And that all came from the early years. So I think from a pro standpoint, the family tradition, the good business skills and all that is definitely worth it. So when I look back, I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons. Would I do the business again or not? But one of the things I absolutely loved was the skills that I sent each of those nephews and nieces off into the world from a customer service standpoint. From a con standpoint, why I would not ever want to do a family business again is I don't know if I have the family, or at least I haven't found the family business yet that would definitely keep the passion, if you will, of everybody. So that's my personal experience with it. But the reason that I wanted to do the episode was in one of our local magazines, they actually did a profile of a bunch of local small businesses. And they asked them a bunch of questions, but two of the questions that they asked, I found fascinating, the different answers and the fact that there were so many similarities between them that I just had to share it with you guys. So the two questions that they asked him was, what's the best thing about having a family business? And what's the biggest challenge of having a family business? And I could relate to a few of these. And then some I had my own unique challenges that I shared with you. And the reason I shared with you mine first is because I no longer have a family business and I'm not doing an interview with a newspaper or a magazine. So the odds are I was going to give a little bit more raw of an answer as far as the biggest con, which is when your family loses the interest in that business. It can go really bad and become very difficult for you as the sole survivor, if you will. So as I jump into this article and share what they said, just know that there's probably some more family drama behind the scenes that wasn't shared in this. So if you have a family business, you know what I mean. And if you're thinking of having a family business, it's important that you go in with your eyes wide open. And I definitely encourage you to talk to other business owners that have family. But real quick, let's take a look at what this article shared because I thought it was pretty interesting. Let's jump right in. The first pro was that you are developing the next generation. And you've heard that actually in mind. One of the things is, and what they were talking about is the next generation to run their business. But I think it kind of goes both ways. You're developing the next generation of leaders, business owners, but also for a lot of these family members, they were building the next generation within their own business who could take on the business after them so they could develop one of those businesses that have been in business for 30, 40, 50, 75 years. They felt also, they used the words like legacy. They were building a legacy for their family to continue, which I thought was kind of neat. The second pro that they talked about was creating longevity of the business, which is exactly what I was just talking about. Is a lot of times when you see those businesses where they say family business for the last 40 years, 50 years, when you have the right type and strong pieces in place for your family business, a lot of times what you're going to find is it's very common for you to have the grandson, the father, the grandfather, the daughter, the mom, everybody was part of this business at some point, or they're still in it. And in the article, we actually had one family that had so many different generations in it and working different aspects of it. Sometimes they were in bookkeeping, sometimes they were out in the field, they were doing different things. But you could see that they had transitioned this business through multiple different generations. So you definitely get to create a business of longevity. The other thing that they felt was a pro is a lot of times your employees and all the people that are working there have the same goals because they know they're in it together. So they're able to come together and have the same vision because they not only talk about it when they're doing the business, they talk about it at home, which is one of those cons is you have to take it home with you at the same time a lot of times. But on the good side is, let's focus on that, is that you can create a set of goals where everybody's in it together. Another thing that people really liked is they said that they could count on each other, that they knew that the other person had their back or the other family member had their back, and that it wasn't like having employees who don't have your back, that when you need them, if you call them up, usually the family member wasn't going to say no, that if something went wrong, that they would do the right thing for the business, that they weren't going to steal from the business and everything else. Now, listen, are you going to have some bad eggs in the family? Yeah, everybody's going to have some. There's a reason that we have the term black sheep of the family. But in most cases, these business owners really like the fact that they could count on their family members to have their back during the business or when they needed them in the business. People also loved being able to work with their loved ones, that they got to spend a little bit more time together. And some cases, I think that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. Sometimes you can have too much of a loved one. But in many cases, they really like the fact that they got to work with their loved ones. Especially when what I've noticed is the ones that really brought that out were the ones that were mother-daughter, father-son type situations where they got to work with their children. Especially when the children seem to be younger. I noticed that. I already talked a little bit about the trust factor, the fact that you can trust your family members more so than others. They really like that. And in other cases, they said that they really liked the fact that they complemented each other on their skill sets and that they could work together better because they weren't as turned off. If a family member was better than them at something, it tend to not rub them the wrong way more. So they would actually take that and they would leverage that. So that was kind of neat. All right, let's talk about the cons that came up in the article. And I found the cons more fascinating, mainly because they were probably the most consistent from family business to family business. And I think there were like 10 families in this article. So it was kind of interesting because the cons were, for the most part, across the board in most of them. One of the things they talked about is when you have to give feedback that isn't positive, that family members don't tend to take negative feedback very well. That when the more senior of the two, the one who was technically in charge or maybe the original owner, had to give feedback, negative feedback to a family member, they didn't always take it too well. And it was more of that family situation. Like, for example, when you have to give feedback to your children, how they don't want to listen, no, I'm not hearing you, kind of a thing, or storm off to their bedroom, that they found that a lot of times those feelings came in because those feelings weren't employer to employee. It was more of father, son, mother, daughter, husband, wife, and that those didn't go over too well. I always like to say they heard mom and dad versus hearing their boss. They felt that, and because of that, they also felt that disagreements tended to escalate much further than what they needed to. Because usually if you're going to tell an employee that, hey, this is the behavior, I didn't agree with this behavior, here's why I didn't disagree with it, please, I don't want you to repeat that. That conversation could last 20 minutes, 5 minutes to 20 minutes. However, with a family member, it tend to go on and can be dragged out for days because of their hurt feelings, and because they are family, they had no problem telling you that. Whereas a lot of times an employee, they might feel that, but they're going to go home and tell their family, not necessarily their boss over and over. So they talked about that. They said as much as people compliment each other, the problem when you compliment somebody with different skill sets, if you will, and different values that you bring to the company, part of the problem is it also created a differencing of opinions. And while you may not always argue with your boss when you disagree with what they have to say or their opinion of how something needs to be done, unfortunately, in a family, you tend to be able to voice those opinions a lot more. And sometimes that could be good, but also at the same time is when that opinion doesn't feel like it's being validated or heard, it could escalate too much further within the business and become a distraction. So that was kind of interesting, is that the different opinions helped, but at the same time, it also created a negative con to the entire thing. And this one here was under cons, but to me, I see it both as a pro and a con. And they talked about having added pressure to succeed and that failure was not an option. And it was interesting that that was under con, because to me, I see that as a pro, that when you're working with the family and you just want to give up, a lot of times you're going to push harder and try harder because you don't want to let down the family. And they were looking at it from a con standpoint, saying that if they didn't want to be in the business, they had to keep doing the business, kind of a situation. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and that someone would think that the pressure of doing the right thing and making things happen and keeping that business going was a bad thing to them. Kind of made me wonder if that was something that they really wanted to be doing, and were they just in that business because it was a family business, therefore they had to keep going, and they saw that as a con. But sometimes I think the added pressure isn't so much a con as it is a pro, but that's just me. Let's see here. I thought this one was pretty funny. They said that one of the cons is you can't fire each other. And, well, that's false. You can fire a family member. You may not want to, or it may be awkward, especially at Thanksgiving. But they said that one of the cons is that you can't fire each other when you get really upset with them. But, and that's probably a pro and a con because on one hand, you don't want emotional firings. You've all seen those shows on TV where they fire the same person over and over and the person keeps working. And the new person says, well, didn't they just fire you? And it's like, yeah, I get fired at least once a week. Kind of one of those situations I think happens a lot with family. I know when I had my business, my nephew and I would go head to head, the one that worked with me the most in the beginning. And I probably told him not to come back so many times just because of his attitude. But eventually, you know what? Things would calm down. He'd get better and I'd let him come back until eventually I didn't let him come back anymore. As far as cons, it does become difficult to fire a family member because it is awkward on one hand, but at the same time is that it is very difficult to fire a family member because on one hand, you do love them very much. It's just like in the real world at other businesses. Sometimes it's harder to fire some employees more than others because you get emotionally invested in them. So you can think about this in a family business, it's really going to be difficult to do. Some people felt that there was way too much family time. You might recall up in the pros, that was one of the things people liked is being able to work with their family. But it was also a con to a lot of folks because they had way too much family time. And I can understand that. I think family is best when it's in doses. So family businesses, sometimes you need to have, go to work to get away and to have that time. So when you're in a family business, that's one of the cons. You really don't have that non-family time, especially difficult when, if it's a father-son, mother-daughter kind of a situation, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to go to separate homes. Maybe not all the time, but most of the time you are. However, when it's a husband and wife situation, partner situation, it's a lot more difficult because you're going to be working together and you're going to be taking it home. So that definitely is a con because you really don't have any downtime. And one of the best suggestions I can make for you on that, and I've heard other people talk about this, is that you have to really pick times where you can't talk about the business. It is what it is. You talk about it during business hours. You can talk about it maybe when you're doing your planning stages and you're working on your business at home. But overall, when you go home, you check out, you leave it there, and especially in the attitudes of being mad, because unfortunately, a lot of times, if you have this big blowout right before you end the day, you're going to take it home and still have that. So you got to be really careful about that. Another thing that they brought up was kind of interesting is that it really hurt when they wanted to do big family events, especially when they had a business that was 24/7 or at least 7 days a week. That, if they wanted to plan a trip to go to Disneyland or to go somewhere, they had to shut down the business and able to go, or at least for everybody in the family to enjoy it, or somebody had to stay behind and run the business. So they felt that was one of the cons to it that kind of, and I can totally see that, especially if you like to do things, you like to go rafting or skiing or off to Disneyland. If you've got a business that will really hurt if you shut it down for a few days, that someone's going to be left behind. Unless you've got a family business that has a mixture of other employees at the same time, other than you, then yeah, you can leave those folks behind. But for a lot of these mom and pop places that had 1 or 2 people, obviously it's not one if it's a family business, but if they had 2, 3, 4 people that were all part of the same business, that somebody was either always left behind or they had to shut down the business. And that would be one of the cons. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And if you're thinking about having a family business, I guess one of the things that I want to make sure that you really keep in mind, and some of you that have a family business will probably either have done this or you wish you would have done this or you're thinking about doing this. One of the best advice that I can give you on a family business is you really need to make sure that you have good conversation up front between the difference of family member and boss, and that you also set up your payroll and stuff as a employee, not a boss or a family member. You need to put people on the payroll. And if you're sharing all of the proceeds, for example, you want to make sure that there's 2 different types of pay, that you don't just say, hey, okay, we're going to split the profits at the end, that you give yourself a payroll and, a salary, because those salaries may not be equal. Because if one of you is working in the office and one of you is working in the field, you might say, okay, an office, it's $10, $15 an hour. This is what you're going to be paid. But if you're the technical person going out in the field, you may say that, hey, mine's $25 an hour. So first off, pay yourselves and each family member what they're worth for what it is that they do. Then when it comes at the end of the day, after you pay all your bills and everything else, and you're left with the profit that's left in the company, if you want to split those a certain way, then great. If it's 50-50, great. If it's, 25-75, great. But I would definitely separate out the difference between payroll and getting paid for what you do, and then the profits. Have two different things, because this can lead to a lot of arguments later on. And your best bet is to make sure that people get paid, because not all jobs are created equal. And if you really have ambition to grow your business and make it huge, you will be very thankful that you did this. It'll probably be one of the best things that you can do. There's so many businesses out there where the biggest mistake that they make is they kind of just say, okay, I'm going to pay you at the end of the day. And because the person is left without a paycheck or anything like that, if there's no profits, nobody gets paid. And that's a bad thing for a single business owner. It's really bad when you start doing that to your family. So if you're going to run a single business and you're just going to take the profits that are left at the end of the day, I don't recommend that. I recommend that you obviously build in the salary that you want, work your business backwards. That's other episodes. But if you're going to do family, you need to treat them as if you would any employee. Give them a salary, guarantee them a certain pay. On tight months, you may have to play with that. Yes, it's obviously easier to go to a family member and say, hey, can I make this up a different time? It's not our goal, but if it happens, it's better for you to do that. But at the end of the thing, please make sure that you pay every family member a certain wage and set it up the right way. All right. So with that, like I said, I wanted to share this episode with you because I thought it was kind of interesting, the pros and cons through these 10 different business owners. And hopefully it resonated with those of you that already have a family business. And for those of you that are thinking of doing a family business, you got to see a little bit of what you can expect. Odds are you probably already knew that some of that was coming. So I thought it was kind of interesting. So if you are thinking about doing a family business, I say go for it. I think, at the end of the day, after reading the article and then thinking through my experience with my Baskin, I loved having a family business. But I also recognize the fact that, not all family members are going to love it at the same time. So you really want to make sure that everybody is engaged. People really want to be it. And if you're the main person who's trying to pull that family business together, just know and keep it in the back of your mind that if worst case scenario happened and you had to go out and replace every single member of your family, are you willing to do that? Because there is a chance that could happen. It happened to me. It's happened to a lot of different people. So be prepared. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully you're able to create a family business that will continue on for generations. Sometimes it may not be the next generation. You may find that you have to do it on your own, have other employees, and then, here comes a grandchild who comes up and loves to be part of that business, or a nephew or a niece, someone you weren't looking at that wants to join the business. So family businesses look all different kinds of ways. So you can create a business that goes on for generations with other family members, just not maybe the one that you start with. So have a plan and have some boundaries around the family and the arguments and how you guys are going to handle things. I think that's the biggest takeaways is, leave it at home. Leave it at work. Don't take it home, and how you guys are going to do that. And then, having some rules around that when you're having an employer to employee kind of conversation, how that's different than mom and dad talking to you and stuff. So lay all that stuff out on the table, have code words if you need to, know when to step back and come back at it. But overall, I will tell you that these 10 businesses do really well in the community because they work well together. They have a great reputation that they build. So overall, it obviously is working for them, and it can work for you as well. So if you're thinking about doing it, I say go for it. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. But before you go, if you are new to the podcast, download the previous episodes, and hopefully you will find a nugget or two that will help you take your business to the $100,000 in take-home pay. And as I wrap this up, I realize being a local small business owner can be a lonely gig at times, but you don't have to do it alone. Just know I'm always here for you. Bye for now. Hey, before you go, I just have one little favor. If you have a subject, a topic, a question that you would like have answered on the show or talked about, please shoot me a message over at Tammy@localsmallbusinesscoach.com. Once again, I want to hear from you, so shoot it over to me, Tammy at localsmallbusinesscoach.com.